presidential order hour. It's now my great privilege to recognize the Vice Chairman of the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations in the Energy and Commerce Committee, Mr. Morgan Griffith of Virginia, certainly one of the most thoughtful members in this body, and you're recognized, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Burgess, I appreciate all the work that you have done on this issue. It is important that you have highlighted it and made it one of the priorities of our committee, not only our subcommittee, but our full committee. Now, earlier this evening, we heard from representatives from Kentucky and from West Virginia. And when you look at the map, you will see that my congressional district, the 9th District of Virginia, touches West Virginia, it touches Kentucky, it touches North Carolina. And what this means to all of us is this, and it touches Tennessee, of course. It means that if you really worked at it in my district, you could get to various doctors and various pharmacists in just a couple of days, because in that small corner of Virginia, you can travel into other states. You can hit 5 states in a single day. And so this is why I have been working on some language for prescription drug monitoring, where the states will be encouraged to work together to try to make sure that we're sharing information. All of the states, or most of the states now, have such a program, but they don't always have the language down the same way. And so what we have to do is, as one of a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen different things that we're looking at in trying to help resolve this opioid crisis, is we need to make sure that we have people looking at it and making sure that those folks who are addicted and are trying to get prescriptions from different doctors and using different pharmacies are not able to do so, to make sure that our programs are working together. And so it's very important that we continue to work. And while I say that it's important, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate so much that you are holding a roundtable tomorrow as a part of our health committee that will be bipartisan, where we're bringing in families from around the country who have suffered a loss, who've had a loved one who has died. And while we're not taking any votes on the floor tomorrow, the health committee will be meeting, because this is just too important to leave Washington without hearing from these important voices, from these people who can bring to us real life stories. Now, we've all heard them in our communities. We've all probably had family members who have been touched by it. But to hear from these families tomorrow, I think, is going to be very special and very poignant. And I appreciate it. And I think that we all have something that we can learn. And then, Mr. Chairman, if I have time, I'd like to talk about pill dumping, because we do have to take a look, and we have a hearing coming up with some of the pharmacies that manufacture these opioids. But we know that in West Virginia, they were dropping millions of pills into communities there, into Williamson, into Kermit, into Mount Shamrock Gay. And as a result of that, those drugs not only went into West Virginia, but some of those pharmacies that were shut down eventually by the DEA were just a few miles, 32 miles, 34 miles from my district and from districts in Kentucky. And so we need to find out why were they allowing this to happen? Why were they perhaps encouraging it to happen? We don't know the answers yet, but we're going to have a hearing on that. The Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee is looking into that matter as well, and has already got lots of information. We're looking at what was going on in the DEA and why they didn't use their power of an immediate suspension order. When they had the authority to do so, they chose instead, Mr. Chairman, it was shocking to discover that they chose to come up with a trial standard as opposed to a standard to stop something bad from happening immediately. They chose to have a trial standard, to have all the proof already wrapped up with a nice bow on it. And as a part of that, we ended up with a lot of drugstores that continued to use a cash business operating, even though the DEA knew there were problems. They wanted to have expert witnesses come in advance. This is not acceptable. And we are working with the DEA to stop that procedure and to make sure that if there are any changes in the law that are necessary, to give them more tools that they can shut down somebody quickly when they see a pattern of abuse. So, Mr. Chairman, the Energy and Commerce Committee is working hard on all these issues, and particularly we are working to make sure that we give the various agencies and the states the authority to help shut down this horrible, treacherous, and dangerous opioid crisis in these United States. I yield back.
And I thank the gentleman for his participation. And as the gentleman was talking about the fact that his state and the surrounding states, it is possible that if there's not collaboration between state prescription drug monitoring programs, a doctor or pharmacist would never know what other prescriptions might have been written for a patient. Our committee actually has a history of working on this. Charlie Norwood, a member Congress from Georgia, 15 years ago, came up with the National All Schedules Prescription Electronic Reporting Act, or NASPR. We've authorized NASPR several times. I'm happy to say that this year in the omnibus bill there actually was funding for the first time provided for the NASPR program. It's just the beginning, and clearly the need for this national reporting program is so critically. A state like Texas, we're huge, where we don't even think about other states in Texas. But the crossing of state lines with this information can be extremely powerful, and in fact, it can be life-saving. So I thank you for bringing that up, and I thank you for the work you're doing on the oversight and investigation side.